Hey everybody, it's your highness Pubert here. Welcome to my new series, Pubert Played, where I review a modern game I'm interested in, semi-quickly because I need the views. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of the way modern AAA games do things nowadays, so this series might not come up too terribly often. But this game I was super anxious to play because it's very near and dear to my heart. Dead Space was one of those games I played when I was a teenager, and it helped shape my taste in video games, so it's very important to me. Well, I played Dead Space 2 first, but I still really love the first one. I used to be one of those kids that exclusively played Call of Duty and other lame shooters, but Dead Space, along with other games like the original Dark Souls and Bayonetta, made me realize that there's so much more to video games than lame military FPS shooters. When I heard they were remaking Dead Space, I was very skeptical at first, because most remakes suck. The good ones suck too, in some form or fashion, even if they're good games in general. I'd explain myself more, but this is about Dead Space. The more I heard about the game though, the more I got excited. The trailers looked fucking awesome, and I couldn't wait to get my hands on it. But in the back of my mind, I kept thinking that they were gonna fuck it up somehow. So, did they fuck it up the ass and completely ruin one of my favorite games of all time?
Gee, I sure hope not.
I've played both the original and the remake back to back, so I can accurately tell you which is the better experience. However, the gameplay you see will be mine from the remake, and I apologize in advance if it's a little janky looking. My computer isn't the most powerful in the world, and I had to put the settings on low while recording. It was still very playable though. I'll try and avoid major spoilers, although there will be a spoiler section for those of you who have played the original. Dead Space is a sci-fi survival horror game that follows engineer Isaac Clarke and his crew Zach Hammond, Kendra Daniels, Aiden Chan, and Haley Johnston aboard a repair vessel that is investigating a distress call sent out from the USG Ishimura by Isaac's girlfriend Nicole Brennan. The USG Ishimura is a planet cracker ship that does exactly what it sounds like it would. It fucking cracks planets open to mine the resources out of them because, as in practically all sci-fi, the Earth has depleted almost all its resources. Before even boarding the planet cracker ship, trouble is afoot. Our crew crashes straight into the Ishimura due to docking systems malfunctions and quickly find out all the people were turned into these horrific monsters known as necromorphs, which spread like an outbreak throughout the ship. And so begins the journey of our hero, Isaac Clarke, uncovering all sorts of fucked up conspiracies and mysteries. The original game came out in 2008 for the Xbox 360, PS3, and PC, and many consider it to this day to be one of the best survival horror games ever, up there with Resident Evil and Silent Hill. It was popular enough to spawn two more main entries, with Dead Space 3 in 2013 being the last one. Unfortunately, the franchise suffered the same fate most survival horror games did back in those days. It strayed away from its survival horror roots and became more of a regular action-packed third-person shooter with every entry, much like Resident Evil 5 and 6 did. This was very apparent with Dead Space 3, which is what ultimately killed the franchise since everyone hated it and didn't buy it, including myself. Although I did end up playing it through some questionably legal means. Gomenasai, Police-kun. The ending to it even tried to sequel bait for a fourth game, which obviously never happened. So, does the remake live up to the original game? I'll start with the graphics. They're honestly stunning, especially when you compare them to the first game. Here are some side-by-side comparisons. Wow, I am pretending to see them while I'm recording this, and they look very impressive. Back when I first played the original, I thought the environments were lit so much darker and scarier than they actually are. Compared to the remake, the original looks incredibly bright and well lit. The atmosphere of the remake is so much more horrific and dark. It's a much needed improvement that I honestly didn't think the game needed. The game looks gorgeous, even on the low settings, which is what I played the game on like I mentioned earlier. Even the characters got a makeover, with Isaac and Nicole being the most apparent ones. I low-key liked his original design a little better, just because he looks a bit dorkier. But ultimately, he looks fine. Although, is it just me, or does Nicole look a little older? I mean, they both kind of do, but Nicole is a little more apparent. I swear, she looks like a baby in the original game. I mean, I don't mind this change, I just thought it was an interesting choice. Maybe all the stress of what happened in the Ishimura aged her a bit more. Another noticeable thing is that Isaac takes his helmet off all throughout the game, so you get to see his face a lot more. Meanwhile, in the original, he only took his helmet off at the very end of the game. I don't think I agree with this decision, but it honestly makes sense. I mean, that thing looks uncomfortable as hell, and if Isaac is feeling less in danger, it only makes sense he would walk around without it on. So I don't mind it too much. When a game doesn't reveal what the protagonist looks like, they always have this mysterious aura about them that makes them a little more interesting, if you know what I'm saying. Additionally, they also made him talk, which I also don't really like. In the original, he was completely silent. The only thing you heard from him was his grunts and screams of pain. But he doesn't talk as much as I thought he would. In this remake, Isaac talks when it's necessary for him to, unlike in the second game where he's full of one-liners and shit, so this change I don't mind too much. I just prefer silent protagonists in my game, since most games like having them say the corniest and most unnecessary shit ever. But that's a topic for another video. Anyway, the graphics are fucking stellar, and if you can't see that, then I don't know, you're fucking stupid. So let's move on to the gameplay. As I said before, Dead Space is a survival horror game. You're scavenging for health and ammo and shitting your pants because you never know when the next necromorph will come around the corner to fucking rip you apart. You get all the weapons and armor from the original, but they get upgraded a little differently, with stuff like the plasma cutter dealing additive damage as you continue to shoot things in the same spot, and the pulse rifle's grenade launcher explosion radius increasing, and more weapon upgrades which weren't in the original. This gives you a lot more incentive to upgrade your weapons than in the original, and you don't have to buy the weapons this time around. You just find them out in the world. Not having to buy weapons like in the original is great because it lets you focus on things that really matter, like buying ammo and upgrading your arsenal rather than worrying about buying a weapon and then hating it because it doesn't adhere to your playstyle. One thing they didn't change, however, is that you still dismember the necromorphs to kill them. If they had changed that, everyone would have lost their shit and fucking murdered the developers, since it's the thing the franchise is known for. Everything about the way the game actually plays is virtually identical here, except for a couple of things, which are a pretty big deal, honestly. For those of you who have never played the original, in addition to your main arsenal of guns, Isaac has stasis and kinesis to help him solve puzzles and dismember necromorphs. Stasis slows anything down that you shoot it at, and kinesis lets you pick up objects.
With your fucking mind.
Well, more with science if anything. However, in the original game, you couldn't use kinesis as a weapon, unlike in the remake. Using kinesis in the remake lets you pull pipes off the walls and the pointy bits off the necromorphs to shoot them at other ones to impale them. The original game kind of let you do this, but it was extremely janky. And the second game refined it a lot more, and it became a staple of the series, and one of the many ways you could conserve ammo. Secondly, they changed the zero gravity sections. In the original, they were very strange. Once you entered a zero gravity section, you were only allowed to jump from surface to surface. You had to aim at a surface and then jump to it. You wouldn't float in the air like you would expect a zero gravity section to play like, so it was also a little janky and awkward, but it was still enjoyable. They changed these sections in the second Dead Space, and they were so much better, and subsequently they were remastered in this one too. They even added more zero gravity sections to the game. Some parts of the game that weren't zero gravity in the original were changed to be zero gravity in this one, and were 100% cooler. They also changed the little blasting asteroids minigame, since in the original it was low-key kind of long, annoying, and hard. Kind of like my dick. In this game, it's a zero gravity space section, where Isaac connects his gun to the turrets, which causes their aim to synchronize, and you can blast the asteroids this way. It's a lot better, so this is another change I don't mind at all. Lastly, most of the map is identical, but this time around they designed the game around letting you backtrack into other parts of the ship, and they added a couple of side missions to incentivize you to do so. In the first game, once you went back into the tram station, that was the end of the level, and you'd have to see a loading screen into the next one. But in this game, they made it a seamless experience, with the only loading screens you see being the ones where you die or reload a save, which was the original intent of the game, to see as little loading screens as possible, to keep you as immersed as possible. It's also why the game is designed around having no UI. If you hadn't already noticed, there is no UI or HUD. Your health bar is on Isaac's back, and so is how much stasis you have. And you see the amount of ammo you have in a clip when you aim the gun itself, and the inventory menu and the map and stuff is a hologram that comes out of Isaac's suit that he interacts with. This is both true in the remake and the original, and this shit is just awesome. I wish more games did stuff like this. All the gameplay changes were done for the better. Nothing was removed, only added, and if it was removed, it was for the better, like the node doors. Nodes are the currency for upgrading your suit and weapons, and in the original game you were required to have one to open specific doors that contained some much needed supplies, so you always had to carry one just in case you ran into one of these doors. But now in the remake, you can concentrate on upgrading everything without those stupid doors. Everything about how this game plays is wonderful, and it makes me never want to go back to the original, but maybe the story changes will make me want to go back? The story has barely changed though. Just like the gameplay, any changes and additions were all for the better. Absolutely nothing was compromised. It starts out with exactly the same story beats, and so does the rest of the story, for the most part. They did change a couple of things here and there to make things make a little more sense. But that's going into spoiler territory, so I'll leave that for the spoiler section at the end. Ultimately, there are only 3 side missions they added, and 2 of them add to the story and expand further on the downfall of the Ishimura. The third one you do mainly to be able to get more supplies from doors needing a master override key to be opened. Although the other 2 side missions do get you special items that are really useful. One of the missions involves Nicole, Isaac's Minecraft girlfriend, more into what happens in the Ishimura. In the original, she was never very involved in what happened. She was just ultimately what drove Isaac to keep going and survive this horrific situation. And that was the end of it. Kind of like a princess to save, if you will. In the side mission for the remake labeled Scientific Methods, you follow her discoveries about the outbreak through these holographic recordings in the Ishimura to ultimately find out if she's even still alive, and to uncover some of the mysteries surrounding this tragedy. Next, in the mission labeled Premeditated Malpractice, you follow one of the characters in the game, Dr. Mercer, in the same way, to find out what he did with a specific patient of his before the outbreak, and how he created the most dreaded enemy in the game. It's not really a spoiler if I tell you what the enemy is, but it's a lot scarier if you don't know about it, so I'll let you find out on your own because I really want you to buy this game. These side missions span almost the entirety of the game, and it lets you know if you can even access the locations these side missions send you to, which is very helpful. They also encourage you to explore the Ishimura more, since the game lets you backtrack through it now. The rewards for completing them are also very much worth it, so if you play this game, I highly recommend you do them. Skip to this time code if you're interested in playing the game at all, because this next part is for people who specifically played the original game, and know the events of it. But if you want to be surprised by some of these changes and know the events of the original, you are also allowed to skip. The rest of you aren't, so fucking listen! I'm starting off with the deaths of the characters, so go away if you haven't already. Everyone dies that's supposed to, none of that changes. So yeah, everyone except Isaac. Nicole is still dead, Hammond dies the same way kind of, and Daniel still betrays you because she's an agent meant to retrieve the marker from Aegis 7, and you know, she dies. I told you to leave if you didn't want spoilers. One of these changes include the fact that Hammond is a lot more broken over about Chen in this one than in the original, specifically this guy. And they encounter his necromorph many times throughout the game, until it ends up killing Hammond, which is very similar to the original, except in that one, Hammond dies to a brute necromorph. This change adds a little more tragedy to an already incredibly tragic game, which is honestly not bad at all. Another thing they changed in the story is that Elizabeth Cross is alive when you get to hydroponics, and she contacts Isaac directly, helping him throughout this section of the game instead of Hammond being there helping out. In the original, she never interacts with Isaac directly, and Hammond is the one helping you out. During the events of the remake, Hammond is completely gone from this part of the game. However, Cross is looking for her boyfriend, Jacob Temple, just like in the original game. Although there is a reason they kept her alive in this remake. At the end, when you discover all of Isaac's encounters with Nicole were just a marker creating an illusion of her, in the original, it just explains that Isaac was doing all the things Nicole was doing to help Isaac, even though she's only an illusion. This doesn't make sense in certain parts, like this one especially, because Isaac is clearly not over there on that computer that Nicole's messing with to unlock the door. It isn't like a huge deal or anything, but it's kind of weird. Instead, the remake explains that the Nicole Isaac was seeing throughout their physical encounters was actually him hallucinating Elizabeth Cross as Nicole, and Cross was hallucinating Isaac as Temple because the marker altered their perceptions of reality. This makes a lot more sense since in both games, Nicole is very tangible because she interacts with the real world when an illusion couldn't do so. It was a welcome change, one that honestly didn't need to be made, but I'm glad it was. Besides, Cross gets killed by Daniels immediately after this discovery, since Cross loses all will to live after discovering she was hallucinating and that Temple was actually dead. When I got to the point where you meet Cross in hydroponics for the first time, I was wondering the entire time why they kept her alive in this one, and was pleasantly surprised to find the reason they did at the end of the game. Finally, they added new enemies to New Game Plus, as well as a secret ending. I haven't played it, so I'm not exactly sure what enemies are different or what the ending even is, but I hope it's cool. Dead Space in 2008 was honestly not a perfect game, and it was even more apparent it wasn't when the second one came out and improved on a lot of its shortcomings, which is what a sequel is supposed to do. Going back to play it was and still is a bit difficult, because you wish that they had implemented all the cool stuff the second one did, even if the game was perfectly fine and fun without them. This remake not only exceeded my expectations, it fixed every single problem most had with the original, and improved upon the formula in ways not even the second and third one did. Not only was I immersed and enamored with the graphics, I was blown away by how much fun I was having the entire way through. Dead Space 2023 is honestly the perfect game and remake. There's absolutely nothing I dislike about it, not even a single nitpick. Well, maybe the helmet and his voicing, but that doesn't really matter. There's honestly no need to go back and play the original. That's how good it is. I was already in love with the original, and the fact that this remake changed so much for the better makes me love both these games and the entire franchise as a whole even more. While playing, I was reminded why Dead Space is one of my favorite games, and I honestly felt like a teenager again playing through it. I was excited to find out what changes they made the entire way through, and to see these sci-fi horrors I fell in love with back in my teenage years in such a brand new and beautiful light. It was such a pleasure to come back to the USG Ishimura and uncover all its mysteries once again. If you're into sci-fi or just horror in general, you're doing yourself such a disservice not going out and getting this game immediately. I really hope this game does well and we see more Dead Space in our future. Alright, I guess subscribe to get notified when my next video comes out, and make sure not to die before it does. Adios.